The rain hammered against the windscreen like bullets as billionaire Oliver Hastings gripped the steering wheel, his knuckles white, heart pounding. Beside him, his 7-year-old daughter Charlotte pressed her face to the glass and whispered words that would shatter his carefully rebuilt world. "Father, that lady by the bins looks just like Mummy." 3 years had crawled by since Victoria's yacht capsized in the English Channel during that violent storm. The Coast Guard searched for weeks, but the sea kept her secrets. They never recovered a body, only her favorite silk headscarf tangled in driftwood near Dover. Oliver had learned to live in the hollow space she left behind, pouring everything into raising Charlotte alone. But now, as he turned his head and saw the woman huddled beneath the broken awning outside the chippy, something inside him cracked open. She had the same delicate build, the same way of tilting her head, and when the streetlight caught her face, he saw it. That small crescent-shaped mark beneath her right ear, the one Victoria got when they went sailing off the Isle of Wight a lifetime ago. His breath caught in his chest. This couldn't be real. Grief played cruel tricks, didn't it? But what if it wasn't a trick at all? What unfolds next will challenge everything Oliver thought he knew about loss, hope, and the power of a love that refuses to die. Stay with this, because what Oliver uncovers about the woman standing in the rain will shatter you before it puts you back together again. London had a way of drowning everything in gray when the rain came. The pavements turned to mirrors reflecting lives half-lived, memories half-buried. For Oliver Hastings, founder of Hastings Technologies, the rain was the only thing that matched the silence that had taken root in his chest. 3 years since Victoria Ashford vanished into the black waters of the Channel. 3 years since that frantic midnight call from the harbor master saying the yacht had gone down in a squall. They'd found debris, her belongings, even her reading glasses floating among the wreckage. But Victoria herself had simply disappeared, swallowed by the dark. The ocean gave back everything except the one thing that mattered. Since that night, Oliver had existed rather than lived. His world had shrunk to boardrooms and bedtime stories, to Charlotte's laughter that sounded so much like her mother's it hurt. That particular Sunday, he'd driven Charlotte to Rossi's in Clerkenwell, a small Italian place Victoria used to love, trying to give his daughter something that felt normal. Charlotte wore her mother's old emerald scarf, the silk one with gold threading that dragged along the floor when she walked. Oliver's throat tightened watching her. Victoria always said that scarf brought good fortune. When they stepped outside after lunch, the wind cut through the narrow streets and the smell of wet concrete filled the air. Charlotte tightened her small hand around his and suddenly went still. "Father, look there." Her voice carried that tremor children get when something doesn't quite make sense. "That woman near the rubbish bins. She has Mummy's face." Oliver followed her pointing finger. Across the cobbled street, near a stack of collapsed cardboard boxes, a woman sat hunched beneath a flickering light. Her clothes were torn and filthy, hair matted and unwashed, face gaunt from hunger. But none of that mattered because Oliver saw what Charlotte saw. The way she held her shoulders, the shape of her jawline, and that mark, that tiny crescent scar beneath her ear that he'd kissed 1,000 times. His heart stopped, then hammered so hard he thought it might burst through his ribs. "This isn't possible," he breathed, but his legs were already moving, carrying him off the pavement into the rain. "Victoria!" he called out, his voice breaking. The woman's head snapped up. Her eyes, pale blue and completely lost, locked onto his. For one impossible moment, the entire city went silent around them. "Victoria, darling, it's me. It's Oliver." The woman's lips parted. Confusion twisted her features. Then something darker. Terror. She scrambled to her feet, shaking her head wildly. No, you've got it wrong," she gasped, voice raw and broken. "I don't know who that is. Leave me alone." She turned and bolted into the alley, her footsteps echoing off the brick walls. Oliver shouted after her, but she disappeared into the shadows, gone as quickly as she'd appeared. He stood there soaking wet, the city roaring back to life around him, rain streaming down his face. Charlotte tugged at his coat sleeve, tears mingling with raindrops. Was that really her father? He couldn't answer, couldn't form words. Because somewhere deep in his soul, in that place that had ached every single day for 3 years, he already knew the impossible truth. Victoria was gone, dead, lost to the sea. And yet that woman's face, that scar, that voice, it was all unmistakably hers. That night, sleep was impossible. Oliver sat by the floor-to-ceiling windows of his Kensington townhouse, staring out at the Thames that eventually led to the channel that had taken everything. The image of the woman played on an endless loop behind his eyes. Every detail haunted him. The way she flinched when he said Victoria's name. The hollow look in eyes that used to shine with brilliance and warmth. Morning came gray and cold. Oliver canceled every meeting, ignored every call, and drove straight back to Clerkenwell. The rain had stopped, but the streets still gleamed like polished stone. He asked everyone he could find. The baker, the newsagent, even the rough sleepers near the railway arches. No one had seen a woman matching her description. Days bled into weeks. Oliver returned every evening without fail, leaving packages of food, thermoses of hot tea, notes tucked into waterproof bags beneath that same flickering streetlight. He told himself it was madness, that he was chasing phantoms. But something ancient and unyielding inside him refused to surrender. Perhaps it was the guilt of surviving when she hadn't. Perhaps it was love refusing to accept what logic demanded. Then one evening, when frost had begun to silver the cobblestones, he saw her again. She was standing beside a charity clothing bin, trying to extract a heavy coat with trembling hands. Her breath made small clouds in the freezing air. Oliver approached carefully, as one might approach a wounded animal. "Hello there," he said gently. "I'm not going to harm you, I promise." She turned, eyes full of suspicion but empty of recognition. "My name's Emma," she whispered. "People round here call me Emma." The name struck him like a physical blow. Victoria used to say that if she ever disappeared and started over, she'd choose the name Emma Ashford. Simple, she'd said. Clean. A blank slate. Oliver's throat constricted. "That's a lovely name," he managed. "You remind me of someone I used to know." She gave him a fractured smile. "Someone you miss or someone you'd rather forget?" He paused, choosing his words carefully. "The most important person I've ever known, and the hardest loss I've ever carried." Before he could say more, a police siren wailed in the distance and she flinched violently, backing away. Then she was gone again, vanishing into the maze of narrow streets. Oliver stood there clutching the bag of supplies he'd brought, understanding with sudden clarity that this was no accident. Fate, or something far crueler, had brought her back into his life for a reason he couldn't yet comprehend. That night, Charlotte found him in the study, staring at the photograph of Victoria that he kept on his desk. The one from their wedding day at the chapel in the Cotswolds. "Father," she whispered, climbing into his lap. "If Mummy really is alive, will she remember us?" Oliver held his daughter close, breathing in the scent of her strawberry shampoo. "If she's out there, my darling girl, I'll do whatever it takes to bring her home." As snow began to fall outside, drifting past the windows in soft white spirals, Oliver looked toward the distant lights along the Thames and thought he saw a figure standing on the embankment. Small, thin, heartbreakingly familiar. The wind carried something that might have been a woman's voice, or might have been nothing at all. For the first time in 3 years, Oliver allowed himself the dangerous luxury of hope. Thanks for watching. Forgive the brief interruption, but we genuinely want your thoughts. If you were Oliver, would you pursue this woman relentlessly? Or would you convince yourself she was merely a stranger who happened to share a resemblance? For the next month, Oliver Hastings became a fixture in Clerkenwell, a ghost haunting the same corners where Emma appeared and vanished like smoke. Each night he brought fresh supplies, a thermos of soup, warm gloves, a torch, and always a note that said, "You matter to someone." Sometimes she took them, sometimes she didn't. He learned she sheltered beneath the old railway bridge near King's Cross, close to the outreach center that overflowed every winter. He didn't rush her. Instead, he left breadcrumbs of kindness. A blanket folded carefully on a bench, a pair of boots in her size, a note that read, "No strings attached." No questions asked. One evening, he discovered her reading one of those notes, her chapped fingers tracing the words over and over. "Why do you keep doing this?" she asked, her voice sharp with distrust. Oliver smiled softly. "Because you remind me of someone who mattered more than anything in this world." "Then you should stop," she said quietly. "Those kinds of memories only bring pain." Something about those words pierced straight through him. Victoria used to say almost exactly that. Memories are beautiful until they become unbearable. The following night, he brought her a hot meal and a photograph. The image showed 3 people on a beach in Cornwall, laughing in golden sunlight. Himself, Charlotte as a tiny thing, and Victoria with wind in her hair. He placed it on the bench between them carefully. "Do you recognize anyone in this picture?" Emma stared at it for a long time. Her hands began to shake as she touched the woman's face in the photograph. "She looks rather like me," she murmured, voice barely audible. Oliver's heart hammered. "That's because she is you." Emma blinked rapidly, frowning. "No, absolutely not. I'm not this Victoria woman you keep talking about. I'm nobody." Her voice fractured. "You've mistaken me for someone else." But her eyes told a different story. Behind the fear and confusion, something flickered. A flash of recognition. A memory trying desperately to surface. Oliver reached for her hand gently. "Victoria, please just listen to me. There was an accident. You were on a yacht that capsized in the channel during a storm. They searched for weeks but never found you. I thought I'd lost you forever." Her breathing quickened. "The water," she whispered, eyes closing. "So cold, so dark, couldn't breathe. Then nothing." Her entire body began to convulse. Oliver caught her before she collapsed, holding her as she shook. When she woke, she was in a private room at St. Thomas Hospital. The doctor informed Oliver that she'd suffered severe hypothermia and malnutrition. The psychiatric assessment confirmed what he'd feared most: dissociative amnesia triggered by catastrophic trauma. Her mind had erased entire chapters of her identity to protect itself from unbearable pain. She didn't remember him, didn't remember Charlotte, didn't remember the life they'd built together. Oliver refused to leave the hospital. He informed the staff that she was his wife, showed them photographs, provided documentation. Most were skeptical. The woman in that bed bore little resemblance to the elegant Dr. Victoria Ashford, who'd appeared in newspapers and academic journals. But Oliver didn't waver. He stayed. When she was discharged, he brought her home to Kensington. The moment she stepped through the door, she froze completely. Everything hit her at once. The scent of jasmine tea, the grandfather clock ticking in the hallway, the wall of family photographs. Charlotte came running, tears streaming down her little face. "Mummy, you came back." Emma staggered backward, overwhelmed. "Please don't call me that," she whispered. "I'm not your mother." Charlotte's face crumpled, but Oliver knelt beside her, voice steady. "Give her time, sweetheart. She just needs time to remember." For the next several days, Emma moved through the house like a specter. She slept in the guest room, spoke in monosyllables, and flinched whenever Charlotte came too close. At night, Oliver often found her standing at the windows, staring out toward the river. One night he finally asked, "What do you see out there?" She hesitated. "The water is calling me, like it's not finished with me yet." Oliver's chest tightened. "You don't belong to the water anymore. You belong here." Emma turned toward him, eyes haunted. "Then why do I still dream I'm drowning?" One morning, she discovered a box in the wardrobe labeled Victoria's Treasures. Inside were letters, photographs, and the pearl necklace Oliver had given her on their 5th anniversary. A single creamy pearl on a platinum chain. She held it like it belonged to a stranger. That evening, Oliver came home early and found her sitting by the fireplace, the necklace draped across her palm. "You wore that every single day," he said softly. Her eyes glistened. "Then why doesn't it feel like it's mine?" He knelt beside her. "Because trauma stole your memories, but love can bring them back." Emma stared into the flames, torn between terror and longing. Then, almost without realizing it, She whispered a single word. "Charlotte." She gasped, hand flying to her mouth. "There was a little girl. She giggled when I sang to her. I called her my little starfish." Oliver's voice broke. "You called her that every night before bed." Tears spilled down Emma's cheeks. She shook her head, overwhelmed by the flood of fragmented images. "I can't. It hurts too much to try." Oliver took her hand carefully. "Then let it hurt. Pain means you're starting to remember who you truly are." Several days later, Emma found Charlotte in the conservatory. Charlotte was painting quietly, pretending not to notice her mother's presence. Emma hesitated, then sat down beside her. "What are you creating?" Charlotte glanced up shyly. "It's us. You, me, and Father." Emma's smile was fragile. "May I help?" For the first time in weeks, Charlotte's face lit up properly. "Yes, please." They painted together in companionable silence. Then, as Emma reached for the violet paint, a tear slid down her cheek. "Purple," she murmured. "It was always your favorite color." Charlotte looked up sharply. "You remember?" Emma wiped her eyes, nodding slowly. "Perhaps just a little." Oliver watched from the doorway, his heart breaking open in the most beautiful way. For the first time in 3 years, hope didn't feel like self-deception. Felt like the beginning of something real. Thanks for watching. Apologies for the interruption, but we truly value your perspective. If someone you loved forgot every moment you'd shared together, would you fight to rebuild those memories? Or would you let them go and fall in love with them all over again as if meeting for the first time? Spring arrived slowly in London, melting the last stubborn patches of ice that clung to the corners of the townhouse garden. Inside the Hastings home, sunlight poured through the tall windows for the first time in what felt like forever. Emma, who was slowly becoming Victoria again, stood in the kitchen watching Charlotte spread marmalade on her toast. It was such an ordinary moment, yet it filled her with something close to wonder. The specialists had warned that recovery would be unpredictable. Some days, Victoria remembered fragments. Charlotte's laugh, the smell of Oliver's cologne, the way rain sounded against the conservatory glass. Other days, she woke gasping and terrified, the phantom sensation of drowning still fresh. But this particular morning felt different. There was warmth in the light, and the shadows in her mind were finally whispering instead of screaming. When Oliver entered the kitchen, Charlotte beamed. "Father, Mum made proper tea. Actual tea, not the dishwater you usually brew," Victoria added with a small smile. Oliver grinned, something softening in his expression. "That's not just progress. That's life finding its way home." He didn't say it aloud, but every moment like this felt impossibly precious. Something he was terrified might vanish if he breathed too hard. For months, he'd carried the fear that she might disappear again, that the past would drag her back to the cold darkness she'd escaped. But every smile, every shared meal, every spark of returning memory anchored her more firmly to the present. That afternoon, Victoria sat in the garden sketching the cherry trees. Drawing had always steadied her, though she couldn't recall learning the skill. Charlotte burst outside with a fistful of daffodils. "Mum, let's make flower crowns," she said, giggling. Victoria smiled and helped her weave the stems together with careful fingers. When Charlotte placed the crown on her head, she whispered, "You look like a queen." Victoria froze completely. Those words echoed in her mind, bouncing off something solid and real. "You look like a queen." That's what Oliver had said on their wedding day in the Cotswolds chapel. The memory crashed over her like a wave. She gasped, clutching the crown of flowers. "There was music," she breathed. "The song was Unchained Melody, and you wore a charcoal morning suit. Your tie was slightly crooked." Oliver, who'd been watching from the patio, went absolutely still. "Victoria," he whispered. She turned toward him, eyes brimming. "I remember, Oliver. Our wedding. The vows. Everything." He rushed to her, wrapping her in his arms. For the first time in 3 years, she didn't pull away or stiffen. She held him fiercely, breathing in his familiar scent, grounding herself in the steady rhythm of his heartbeat. Charlotte clapped her hands, laughing through tears. You remembered, Mummy. You actually remembered. That evening, the three of them sat together on the sitting room floor, surrounded by photograph albums Oliver had kept hidden away all this time. They flipped through images of birthdays, seaside holidays, Christmas mornings at the house. Victoria studied one photograph, a family selfie at the London Zoo. She laughed softly. You were absolutely terrible at taking pictures. Oliver smiled. You always said I compensated by being devastatingly handsome. I must have been completely besotted, she teased. You still are, he said quietly. She blushed, looking away, and for a moment the room felt exactly as it had before the world shattered. Weeks passed, and the house filled with life again. Victoria returned to her research position at Imperial College part-time, rediscovering the work that had once defined her. Her name appeared on a new paper about marine conservation with a dedication that read, "For my family, my reason for surviving." But healing wasn't a straight line. Some nights the nightmares returned with vicious clarity. She'd wake up choking, reliving the yacht capsizing, the freezing water flooding her lungs. One night she whispered, "I saw the others, Oliver. The crew. They didn't make it out." Her voice broke. Why did I survive when they didn't? He brushed her hair back gently. Perhaps because love wasn't finished with you yet. She looked at him through tears. Or perhaps it wasn't finished with us. Months later, on a bright summer morning, the smell of coffee and pancakes drifted through the house. Charlotte came running from the garden, her hair wild and her cheeks flushed. Mom, Father, the river looks so calm today. Can we go down to the embankment? Oliver hesitated, but Victoria nodded. Yes, it's time. They drove to the spot along the Thames where the river widened toward the sea. The sky was crystalline blue, the same shade she'd once feared would be the last thing she ever saw. Victoria stood at the railing, her reflection shimmering on the water's surface. She took a deep breath, then slipped the pearl necklace from around her neck and let it fall. The splash was barely audible. Oliver frowned slightly. Are you certain? Victoria smiled through tears. It belongs there. I don't need it anymore to know who I am. Charlotte slipped her small hand into her mother's. Who are you, Mummy? Victoria knelt and pulled her daughter close. I'm the woman who found her way home. That evening, they sat together on the back terrace as the sunset painted the sky in shades of rose and amber. Oliver poured 2 glasses of wine and handed one to her. 3 years ago, he said softly, I used to come out here every night and talk to the stars, hoping somehow you'd hear me. I suppose the stars were listening after all, Victoria said. Or perhaps they were just waiting for me to remember the sound of your voice. In the quiet, Charlotte curled up between them, fast asleep. The world felt whole again. Not perfect, but beautifully, painfully real. Victoria looked toward the horizon where the river met the sky, the same expanse of water that had once stolen everything from her. Now it had given back what mattered most. I don't remember the capsizing anymore, she said. Only what came after. The moment I realized I still had something worth living for. Oliver kissed the top of her head. And what was that? She smiled. You. This. Us. The last light slipped below the horizon. But inside that house, the night was warm and full. The ghosts were finally gone. All that remained was love rebuilt from water, memory, and the stubborn refusal to let go. What did you feel watching Victoria's journey from loss to healing? Do you believe love truly has the power to bring someone back from the darkness? If the story moved you, comment 100 below. Tell us which country you're watching from. And please don't forget to like, share, and spread the story of hope and second chances.